this is where the problem is. The government of Kenya actually added a new levy last year of 7 shillings in the fuel prices. And how the government works is that time when the fuel prices are coming down, actually that's the reason why Kenyans never felt the global deceleration of the oil prices. Because it's around that time that the government introduced a secret 7 shillings in fuel levy. That is partly one of the problems why the fuel prices are going up. But the more unfortunate bit is that this year, the government has taken that 7 shillings, taken to the banks as security, and then they have taken a loan of 175 billion shillings. This money is not reflecting in the government books as a debt. And therefore, it can only pass as an illegal debt. Because whatever is not accounted for as a debt, then any other debt is illegal.
Nobody's talking about our debt situation. 70% of your revenue is going to pay for debt. You are left with 30 shillings, 30%. 30 shillings out of every 100 Kenya shillings. With 30%, you need almost 50 to pay salaries. You need 35 to send to counties. What remains for development? They keep going back to the market to borrow. And these are conversations that I assure you, Ayub, no legacy politician will want to have it. Why? Because they are the ones who took these illegal debts. They'll rather come and burden the Kenyan people with the obligation to pay for this. And before we address the debt question, we will have more and more protests. Even if you 100% address the questions of corruption, even you address the extrajudicial killings, Kenyans will still come out because you'll be coming back to them every year, every day, to raise their taxes, charges, and levies. That odious debt.
Who in your view are the original sinners? Because Kibaki left us with something.
In fact, by the time when Kibaki was leaving, we were only paying 18% of our revenue was going to debt finance. So which means out of every 100 Kenya shillings, 18 shillings was going to finance debt. A very comfortable space to be. Today, it's 70%. Who are the original sinners? The original sinners is William Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta. Aden Duale moved a motion in Parliament to amend the PFM Act to allow for spending of debt taken abroad at source without even landing in the exchequer account. That is how Eurobond 1, for example, that money, $2 billion US, only $1 billion US could be accounted for that landed in Kenya. $1 billion US landed in a private account in Qatar. The second person was Mbadi, who seconded the motion, moved by Duale. The other person we must pay attention to is the Accountant General, the ones who opened fake accounts in the JP Morgan, the Kenya sovereign account. So we must name names and we must call them to explain how is it that today you are telling us our debt stock is 11.5 trillion. And you keep coming to the Kenyan people as the sovereign to finance that theft. And we did not receive the 11.5 trillion. You cannot show us projects in this country today that are worth 11.5 trillion in 12 years. That to me is the problem.
All right.
And we must address it as a people.
Yeah.
Everybody is aware that there is a debt problem, number one, and that there's not enough money to pay the debt and run the country at the same time.
Correct.
And that people have risen up to say, look, this is a problem here.
Correct.
You cannot make a conducive environment for us to get jobs. You can't educate our children. You can't put enough food on the table. And because we're bringing up those issues, rather than solve the problem because there is a personal interest there, you're going to shoot us to keep us quiet?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because what choices do they have by solving the problem? You have two choices. You default or you say, I'm not paying it. Our position is that it is odious debt, which means that it is illegal debt that we should not be paying. As far as I'm concerned, that debt, we have no debt in this country. So that 70 shillings of every 100 should be wiped out. And I would wipe it out like yesterday. Right? But what are the consequences of that? A lot of these people, and William Samoei Ruto is one of them, he was part of creating that odious debt. He was in the government of Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. And they created that odious debt. In fact, William Samoei Ruto was the one given in the sharing of power the docket of finance. I know because I'm the one who did the MOU. His docket of finance. Rotich was his recommended appointee. So they know what they did. The minute you stop paying that debt, the creditors of that debt will look for them. The country will ask, why have we been paying that debt? We want whatever we paid to come back. What happens? They won't do it. So what is the other consequence? If you default, the economic ramifications that come out of a default will be much worse than you're talking today. They think they have stabilized the shilling, yet there's still economic pain. But I can tell you, default would mean the shilling is probably about 300-400 shillings
to the dollar.
All right? Everyone's life would literally come to a standstill. And that is more frightening than what they're currently doing. So, you say, postpone the problem. Sweep the problem under the rug. And if people come out, try and politicize it. Try and say, it's not about pain, it's political this, or it's tribe this, or it's that person, or it's this, or it's that. And hope that it's, I believe, after last year, they believed it was over. Okay? Now it has come back. Right? I watched William Ruto talk last week. That man is frightened. He is frightened. Okay? This system is frightened. You hear them, the system talk about shooting people. They are frightened. They are caged. They're in a corner. Right? They're wondering, can they handle another one and another one? Like this. The whole world saw what we saw last week. Right? They are frightened. Now, they did not anticipate it. So it'll be interesting to see how they believe they are going to manage this particular revolution. Now, just before you go on, Dennis, I want you to imagine to 2027 that every single June 25th will be celebrated this way. Are we agreed, Wanokari?
Yes.
So in 2027, which is the so-called targeted election, we have, my deputy has a case in court trying to make sure that the Supreme Court adheres to what is in the Constitution.
Yeah.
But let us even say it's 2027. June 25th falls within the 3-month campaign period to the election. I want you to imagine these demonstrations during campaign time. All right? 2 months to the election. This government has no chance of surviving. All right? It will probably react the same way if that's how they react, killing people. Right? And they'll brandish it, God knows what. They may even try to create a state of emergency or something of the sort. But at the end of the day, right, they will not be able to stay in power. So what some of us are asking is, why wait until then? You can't solve the problem. All you want to do is turn Kenya into killing fields, right? Killing young people, killing our future generations, right? You're doing so economically, now you're doing so with the gun. Why are you in power?
But Jimmy, if that's the case, let's just assume, for this argument's sake, let's just assume they're not in power. Whoever takes over, because when this current government took over, among the first speeches, they, from the promises, and it was very clear, the signs were there, that look, we had promised this is what we're going to do to the economy to fix things, but we have seen that when we came into power, they're empty coffers, there's no money. That's what they said. So the next government, whether it's this one that will still take over, another one coming in, there's already a conversation from these realignments that has, I'll call an offshoot that has come from this. And they're saying, look, your pay slips have been raided. We're going to make sure that we stop it. This housing levy, we're going to make sure that we stop it. They're already having that economic conversation that we're going to fix this. Yet we have a debt issue.
Correct.
And so my question to you is, what is this uncomfortable conversation we are not having as Kenyans, because we may change the characters, the issues will still be the same?
Then that's a wonderful question. I'm so glad you brought it up. You're very right. There is that conversation. And I want to talk about the different groups. There's the broad-based group that is about continuity. Status quo, continuity. Mm-hmm. There's that group, and those were the presidential candidates of 2022. Their deputies are in another group, right? Which I will call the one-term group, the whatever you want to call them. But that's where their deputies are. And those are the ones having that conversation about reduction of taxation. But they are not telling you how they will pay the debt. That's the uncomfortable discussion. How do you reduce the 100 shillings? All right? These 70 shillings of every 100 going to debt is going to continue until 2034. In other words, it grows every year. In fact, this year, I'm waiting for the figures. We're estimating that they are short on about 250 billion worth of tax revenue. So it may not even be 70 this year. It is 78% by our estimated calculations. All right? Wow. Of our tax revenue going to debt. It will be worse next year. That's 2 trillion going to debt this year. It is another 2 trillion and more next year. And it continues until 2034. Right? Now, they are not having that conversation because who are they? Who are they? They are the same players. Uhuru and Ruto, I kept saying, were a virus that just keeps mutating. All right? In 2022, one was on his own, the other was supporting another candidate. And all these people you're talking about were in either one of those two camps. It is the virus keeping on mutating. They will never solve the problem. Because solving the problem means that you are going after the very people, right, that created it, that are your benefactors. You have benefited from. You've been made out of. You had jobs from. Right? So they will not go after them. So they will not change the arena. That's why there's a new alternative option that's coming out. And Gen Z are leading it. Okay? Where it's politics of issues. Politics real. Not tribe. Not this division, that division. Not telling us hustler dynasty. No. Not telling us I'll reduce housing levy and telling us I'll reduce taxes. Okay, so how do you pay the debt? I mean, let's be honest. Right? Let's be honest.
But you're never going to get out of it. You won't get out of it.
You'll not get out of the problem. You'll not solve the problem. Those, in fact, by the way, housing levy is bringing how much money? 70 billion? All right? 70 billion. Remove it. You are paying 2 trillion. Now, the converse, which is the alternative, is saying this, that our stolen future, we want to reclaim it. And the way you reclaim it economically is with debt. You remove that debt, you save 2 trillion every single year until 2034. Now, I want you to imagine what 2 trillion does. You're talking about Shah and Shif, nobody will have to pay it. You need 170 billion for universal health care. Nobody has to pay. You need another almost 200 for education. Primary, high school, and university. Nobody will have to pay. Okay? You imagine the amount of services, not only services, but development that you can do without borrowing a cent. We don't have a revenue problem in Kenya. We have an expenditure one. And the expenditure one is purely debt servicing.
Do we have a country that we can look at as an example that said, look, we are not going to pay debts?
Yes.
And so we look at the precedent that has been set.
What happened is, the issue of odious debt started with Cuba long time ago. In fact, the Americans helped them come out of a debt that was claimed by the French. But you have people like Mozambique, our neighbors here, who had what you call a tuna bond, like our equivalent of our Eurobond. Right? That went to their own constitutional court. I want you to imagine their laws are not anywhere as good as ours. Our chapter 12 in the Constitution, public finance, and our Public Finance Management Act are so good. Now, theirs are not as good, all right, in Mozambique. And when they were there, They went to Constitutional Court after the regime had left. Parliament was even a defendant of that debt, and they lost. And they reclaimed $2 billion from Credit Suisse, another bank, a Russian bank called RVM, right? And people were jailed. People were jailed. You have Malaysia that had the 1 MDB debt of $4 billion. That has jailed a former Prime Minister, Conese, for 12 years. Right? And many others. And Goldman Sachs has had to refund that money and pay a fine. So those are odious debt particular. Ours, Dennis, our laws are so good. All right? This is just, one doesn't even need to go to court. Power, all you need to do when you get to power is say, I'm not paying that thing. It is unconstitutional. It is not in our laws. And whoever you gave that money to, because it never entered the consolidated fund, go and look for those people.
But Jimmy, there is the talk in terms of I'll not pay these odious debt, and there is what economists are saying, and I just want you to respond to that, that we stop paying that debt and the economy automatically tanks based off what international organizations would say. So how would you
How does it
respond?
tank? Why does it tank?
Because apparently the rating of Kenya's economy would not be so good.
No. Are they saying that we should pay criminality? Dennis? Is that what they're saying? We audited the expenditure of government and the tax revenue of government between 2013 and 2023. 10 years. All right? Do you know what the deficit is in 10 years? Was only 1.3. In other words, they had a shortage between expenditure and revenue of 1.3 trillion. We borrowed 7.7. 6.4 trillion we did not need.
Right.
So 1.3 trillion is what we need in 10 years. That's roughly what? A deficit of 200 per year? Right? 100, in fact, 100 and something per year. Right? 100 billion is our deficit. In other words, we have the revenue. So even if those people say they don't want to help us, we are not going to give you development money, we don't need it. Do you understand? We don't need it. So why should we tank? Because we need who?
Okay.
We die if we continue paying.
Were there external beneficiaries to this debt? And I think that's
Absolutely.
the question here that we ask. Because one would imagine that you take debt as an entity, as a state entity, and that it is supposed to go towards development projects, depending on what your internal laws are. We know what that is. You borrow for debt or you borrow for shortfall in the budget, in the fiscal period. But that's not exceeding a term of 90 days.
Yes.
We know this.
Ruto simpigi kura. Amenajisi inchi. Bila kutumia hata kondom.
This is Selector Dede.
Wanadhani ya bongo lala, ikikupita we bongo lala. Na walosema jana iwezi fika leo, tuko ground tunasoza. Hatujikuku mewaka sana, na mabisto wanachafua raga. Na walosema jana iwezi fika leo, tuko ground tunasoza. Hakuna boka, peleke shuleni watasoma. Madaktari wamegoma, hapa sani Yesu atatuponya. Wambie punde imechoka sana, farasi bado ijapatikana. Ni mandai wanagonya na mali wanaponda, unakonda wananona. Maandamano, 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 amise maandamano, 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 maandamano.